And I'm back. All right. So basically, because of that reason, because they had to squeeze in a basically a central processing unit, a CPU, and a GPU onto the same die, you when you're faced with that situation, what they did, they favored graphics, and so your CPUs, while your graphics were about 10 times as powerful, your CPU or your central processing unit was anywhere from 2 to 3 times as powerful, and sometimes not even that. So you're getting modest gains in things like animation, physics, game logic, artificial intelligence, those types of things. Okay, so that's important to note because when we move into the ninth gen, when we move to the PlayStation 5, if we're using an SoC or an APU, basically a system on a chip, now we're doing a one-to-one upgrade. So unless they want to, and I'm gonna backtrack just a little bit. I'm gonna pause just a little bit on what they could do or would do as far as the allocation of resources between the CPU and the GPU on an SoC on that singular chip. I'm gonna just pause and leave you guys hanging for just a little bit to explain to you what we're looking at now. Now, not I can't remember if I mentioned the fact that the manufacturing nodes on chips are in the last video are not representative of actual measurements, since the 28 nanometer node, or was it the 32 nanometer node, that was the last time they actually measured them accurately. Going forward, for the 22, the 20, the 16, and the 14, they were basically marketing terms. In other words, on a 7 nanometer node, I'm not entirely sure what the darn thing's going to measure. What we should be looking at, though, and I'm going to use the Xbox One X here as a reference. That's why we're playing an Xbox game here. It's not an Xbox exclusive, but it is AC Origins on the Xbox One X. Because I want to use this SoC, the APU, the chip that powers the Xbox One X, as a reference. So the Xbox One X uses a 360 square millimeter SoC, fabricated on a 16 nanometer node. What that's going to do for you is give you 6 teraflops of graphics processing power and a CPU that is modestly faster than the one in the original Xbox One. It's important to keep in mind because when you look at going to a 7 nanometer process, okay, and this is if we're just taking into account or accepting as fact that it's actually going to be actual 7 nanometer versus an actual 16 nanometer process, we are looking at an SoC that could potentially be 35 teraflops. And that's also increasing the central processing unit by about 5 to 6 times as much in power over the Xbox One X's. Okay? So is Sony going to do that? Are they going to employ a 360, an SoC that large? Most likely not. And correct me, you guys correct me if I'm wrong. I've got my watchdog here. She's trying to attack the neighbors because they had the audacity of going to the patio on their balcony. You can see them from ours. So she's being very protective. But if you guys correct me if I'm wrong, I think on the PlayStation 4 and the PlayStation 4 Pro, the SoCs were about 320 square millimeters in size. And I'm not entirely sure if it was a 16 nanometer node or a 20 nanometer node for the PlayStation 4 Pro. But let's take into account, let's just say that they're going to continue that, okay, that they will be using a 320 nanometer node for the PlayStation 5. That's fine and dandy. How powerful exactly it'll be depends, I think, greatly on when it ships. Now, I know that they've been saying this rumor, this around the rumor says that it could easily be 2018 that's not outside the realm of possibility. I think that's complete hogwash. It won't happen for two reasons. First of all, this generation cycle is going to be longer, not shorter, if anything. I know they said they wouldn't wait that long, as long to introduce a new console as they did last time, but I seriously think they were referring to the mid-cycle refreshes. Secondly, there's some good reason why they would want to wait, and we'll get to that a little later in the video. But I do want to say it is going to greatly depend on when. Okay, so if they decide to ship in 2019, because I believe it's going to be either 2019 or 2020, then we're going to end up with a 20 teraflop GPU on that SoC. That's right, 20 teraflops, easily 20 teraflops. If they wait till 2020, again on the same nanometer node, we'd be looking at 24, which would even be more impressive. Now you're saying 9th gen. You just said that it's a 7 nanometer node for both of them. And yes, you're absolutely correct, guys. It is 20 or 7 nanometers on both of them. But the reason why you would be getting more power is if you wait a year, you're going to be getting better yields, which translates to better performance. Now, whether that performance is translated onto a slightly larger SoC, or simply due to the fact that you can raise the clock frequency even higher, well, that all depends on what actually happens. But those are my predictions as far as general CPU power. And that is based on what they're able to achieve on the Xbox One X. And it's also greatly dependent on price. And I'll tell you this, I didn't want anything to do with the Xbox. I didn't like what I was disgusted by the box, first and foremost. I thought it was way weaker than anything that I would want to even mess with. And I didn't like the direction that Microsoft was taking Xbox in. So I thought it was very anti-consumer, very anti-me, basically. And so I didn't want to touch it. But then Phil Spencer came in with the Phil Spencer doctrine, and then the Xbox One X, and that's why I'm on the Microsoft platform right now. Having said that, I also believe that it's greatly dependent on the price, and that's going to be important. A $500 price point is going to basically give us as much technology as possible. A 4K Blu-ray player, that's a given. We're going to want a lot of memory and fast memory, or I should say fast memory and lots of it. So that brings me to my next point, and that is going to be memory. So we were saying as far as the trends and following the trends, we'd be looking at about 128 gigabytes for the PlayStation 5. And it's absurd, I understand. But some way, shape, or form, we've got to get enough that it's going to allow us to do things far greater than we've ever been able to do before. And just addressing the graphics increase alone doesn't make you a next-gen console. You're going to have to address the implementation of systems which are going to be memory hungry as well. Things like your meta AI, basically your world states, physics, material handling, things like clothes and collision detection. I was talking to my girlfriend about graphics, and she was looking at the graphics, and they're like, yeah, they need to work on collision detection. You know, collision detection is bad in video games when somebody who's relatively new to them is putting out terms like collision detection. In other words, when you pile up bodies on top of each other, they basically go right through. A little bit of a gruesome example. But yes, things need to not just bump into each other and be discrete, can't occupy the same space. You can't have people walking right through each other. but they need to be able to react and respond realistically. And given the fact that these systems are going to be able to do more and more from a multimedia standpoint because it's coming, then you have to understand a modest increase like what Red Gaming Tech or Red Tech Gaming was saying to 16 gigabytes is even more absurd than 128 gigabytes. So I think for a 2019 release, the minimum is going to be 32. Now, if we can make it to, a $500 price point and introduce a system in 2020, then we may very well be able to swing 64 gigabytes. And I would imagine probably the most cost effective at that time might be GDDR6. And I'd love to be able to say, oh, it wouldn't be great to have 128 gigabytes of HBM3. I just don't think that even at a $500 price point that's going to be happening. So while I'm not going to predict the price, I will say this, that depending, if it's a $400 price point in 2019, we're looking at a 20 teraflop machine that is going to, at a $400 price point, ship with 32 gigabytes of relatively fast GDDR6. In 2020, we're looking at a 24 teraflop machine that ships with about 64 gigabytes of RAM. I'd be hoping at $500. Okay. Now, one of the things I neglected to mention, strictly speaking, if we're following the trend, the GPU should be around 18 teraflops. I just don't think that that's going to be the case, partly because of 4K and the PlayStation 4 Pro. So the PlayStation 4 Pro has kind of closed the gap between the PlayStation 4 platform and the next generation, which would be the PlayStation 5. So also, we're going to be jumping head into 4K as far as the main display. I think two things are going to happen. First of all, you're going to have about a 50% saturation level or market penetration for 4K televisions, and that is going to actually be even represented even greater by the fact that you're going to get greater adoption of 4K displays by the next generation console enthusiasts. So probably 80% of the people who are going to buy the PlayStation 5 initially, the first 2 years, have already got a 4K television. And probably half the ones that are left over are going to buy one around the time that the console ships. So because of that disproportionately greater representation of 4K adaptation, you know that these things have to be built from the ground up to do, whether it's full 4K initially and then migrate over to 3.4K as things like graphics become much more and more intensive, the quality of them. Another thing we haven't even delved into is the ray tracing, which I'm probably going to save for the next video. So having said that, there's going to be a disproportionate amount of representation in graphics because the technology is going to allow it, and hopefully we'll get this Ryzen core, hopefully at 8-core multi-threaded, so we'll be looking at 16 threads total that can really represent changes that need to happen, the revolutions that need to happen on the GPU side. And we're going to delve into that in the next video. This is going to be the third installment. You guys rate, comment, subscribe. I know these are a little hard to follow. It's a little fun for me to do it this way, but I know it's a little harder to follow. All right, so I'll be right back, guys.